a terrifying night in the most haunted place in America. It was an old suburban hospital, one of those places with long corridors and rooms without doors. The place was like an anthill full of activity during the day, but at night it was a different story. It wasn't just patients who were afraid of the darkness here. Doctors, nurses, orderlies, and even priests were also terrified of the looming night. And what was supposed to be the safest place became the scariest. The building stood abandoned, weathered and gray against the bleak sky. It had been closed for decades, but the rumors of its haunting still persisted. Stories of disembodied voices, flickering lights, and spectral figures had made it a local legend. Even the bravest of souls hesitated to approach it, let alone step foot inside. The townsfolk spoke of it in hushed tones, warning trespassers of the malevolent spirits that lurked within its decaying walls. They said the hospital wasn't just haunted, it was a vortex of paranormal activity. One day, though, curiosity got the better of two lovers named Marcus and Clara. Neither of them believed in ghosts, and they thought all those stories were just a bunch of superstitious nonsense. They decided to spend the night in that very same hospital, which everyone considered to be the most haunted place in the world. But the question is, why did they want to do such a thing? As dusk began to settle, casting long shadows across the overgrown lawn, the old hospital seemed to hunker down and breathe a sigh of dread. Its windows, vacant eyes staring blankly into the gathering gloom, the rusted swing gates creaked open as if inviting the night itself to come and play. The overgrown weeds and foliage seemed to form a protective barrier around the perimeter, as if nature itself was wary of what lay within. The silence was thick and heavy, punctuated only by the distant call of an owl, a lonely sound that echoed the desolation of the place. It was a silence that pressed against their ears, amplifying every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, every chirp of a cricket. It was as if the very air was thick with anticipation of something about to happen. With each step they took, the atmosphere grew heavier, the silence more oppressive. The closer they got to the main entrance, the more the weight of the hospital's history seemed to press down on them. The front door, a once imposing entrance, now hung precariously from one hinge, beckoning them inside with the promise of untold horrors. As they crossed the threshold, they felt a sudden drop in temperature, a shiver running down their spines. The musty odor of decay and despair hit them, bringing with it a sense of hopelessness and morbidity. It was then that Clara noticed the first sign of disturbance. A rocking chair in the corner, moving slowly back and forth as if propelled by an invisible force. Their imaginations ran wild. Was it a trick of the light or something more sinister? The rational part of them screamed, "Run away!" Yet they found themselves rooted to the spot, paralyzed by fear and morbid fascination. They started hearing whispers, soft, unintelligible murmurs that seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves. Sometimes they sounded like anguished cries, sometimes like desperate pleas. It was as if the building was trying to communicate some unspeakable horror, trying to warn them to leave. Yet despite the terror that threatened to consume them, Marcus and Clara pressed on. As they ventured deeper into the hospital, they came across a room with a door hanging off its hinges. Inside, a single bed was positioned at an unnatural angle, as if someone had been hastily trying to escape. On the wall next to it, a clock was frozen at 3:33 a.m., a grim reminder of the time when the last patient died. They could feel the despair, the loneliness, and the utter hopelessness that had filled this room in the final moments of human occupancy. It was a heavy burden to bear, a legacy of suffering that refused to be laid to rest. In another room, they found a medical cabinet with drawers pulled out, revealing rusted instruments of pain and suffering. Surgical tools, syringes, and vials lay scattered about, each item whispering tales of agony and despair. It was a macabre display that served as a stark reminder of the hospital's dark past. Then they saw the nursery, a place where joy and laughter should have echoed, but now was consumed by an oppressive silence. Cramped cribs lined the room, each one seeming to stare back at them with accusing eyes. Some of the cribs were moving slightly, like they were rocked by an unseen hand. Dolls lay on the floor, their vacant eyes staring into the abyss. The air was heavy with the scent of decay and death. It was a place where innocence had been lost and replaced by an eternal haunting. At that moment, the lovers realized the gravity of their situation. The spirits here weren't just passive presences. They were angry, malevolent, and vengeful. They were trapped here, bound to this place by their pain, their anger, and their fear. And they wanted to make sure that nobody ever found peace here. They tried to run, but it was too late. One of the ghosts had already caught up to them. They turned just in time to see a translucent figure hurtling towards them, its eyes burning with an otherworldly fire. Time seemed to stop as the ghost loomed over them, its icy fingers reaching out to claim them as its own. In that moment, fear turned to ice. Their blood ran cold and their hearts pounded against their ribs like trapped birds. Suddenly, the ghost was upon them, its presence seeping into their bones, chilling them to the core. They could feel its icy fingers on their skin, its breath like a blizzard on their necks. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the ghost vanished, leaving behind a silence so profound it was deafening. They fled into the night, stumbling blindly through the darkness, the ghostly apparition at their heels. Their breaths came in ragged gasps, their footsteps echoing their terror. They didn't dare look back, but they could feel the ghost's presence growing closer, its icy fingers now a tangible threat. Then, just when they thought they couldn't outrun the grim specter that pursued them, the ground beneath their feet gave way. They tumbled down a hidden opening, landing hard on the cold, unforgiving ground. The chase was over, at least for now. Panting, their bodies trembling, they realized they had stumbled into an underground labyrinth, a maze of tunnels that stretched into the unknown. With each step they took, the darkness seemed to deepen, the silence to grow. The air grew thick with the stench of decay and despair. They were deep beneath the hospital now, in a realm where hope seemed to have no purchase. But their ordeal was far from over. The ghost was here somewhere, lurking in the shadows, waiting to claim them. They ran, not knowing where they were going, their footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness. The tunnels seemed to stretch endlessly before them, promising nothing but more darkness and more fear. They were lost, utterly and hopelessly lost in a labyrinth of their own terror. Then suddenly the darkness lifted. They burst out of the tunnel and found themselves outside. They had somehow escaped the clutches of the ghost and the underground labyrinth. Breathless, they collapsed onto the grass, their bodies shaking with exhaustion and terror. Just then, a faint glow appeared in the distance. With renewed strength, they stumbled towards it, their steps lighter now, their hearts filled with cautious hope. As they approached, they saw it was the emergency room of the nearby hospital. Relief washed over them. They had made it, but their joy was short-lived. As they stumbled through the door, their wounds and injuries became apparent. They had cuts, bruises, and a lot of scratches. Their clothes were torn and dirty, their faces pale and drawn. The doctors and nurses rushed to their aid, tending to their wounds and comforting them. But as the first rays of sunlight touched the horizon, they both looked at each other, their eyes wide with a shared horror. What they had endured in the haunted hospital was something neither of them would ever forget. They knew they had survived the night in the most haunted place in America, but they also knew they had cheated death. The ghost was still out there, and they had only escaped it by the slimmest of margins. And so it was that their adventure ended not in the graveyard, but in the emergency room. And as they recounted their tale to the medical staff, they realized that their story would become a local legend, a chilling reminder of the horrors that awaited those brave, foolish, or desperate enough to spend a night in the most haunted place in America.